in order the budget hearing meeting for Murphysboro Community Unit School District 186. Nancy, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Bain?
Here.
Mr. Weaver?
Here.
Mrs. Shore? Here. Mr. Green?
Here.
Mrs. James? Here. Mrs. Miller? Here. Mr. Rungy?
Here. Next, we need the Pledge of Allegiance, and Mr. Ridings, will you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Noah. All right, we need to approve the agenda. Mr. Brody, are there any additions or changes?
No.
I will accept the motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Presentation of the proposed budget. And Mrs. Bush, I assume that this is you.
Really? No. Yeah, I kind of assumed it would be. The budget that I've just handed out is just very slightly different than the budget that's been on the display for the last 30 days. There was a modification in debt service on local sources, and that was just due to the property tax abatement. When I first put this in, I failed to include the fact that we had abated property taxes I think January that will roll into our receipts this year, so less receipt for that abatement. So that's been adjusted. The budget, as I said, it's been on display for 30 days, and I have not had any comments or in writing or questions or verbal. And at the end of the fiscal year, proposed fund balances, looking at page 3 of the budget summary, looking at a $3.4 million fund balance in the education fund, which is primarily the fund that as you all know, that most of our biggest expenses and revenues flow through. That represents a little over 3 months of payroll for the district. So we are still not looking at big cash balances when it comes to our education fund. If you remember, just at the beginning of last fiscal year, due to some state funding issues, we were looking at that time 2 months of balances on hand and worried about how we were going to make payroll. So it looks really big, but in the scope of things, and if you're looking at a $24 million budget, that is not a huge balance to look at in our biggest fund. One of the things that I do every year when I do the budget is try to maximize as much revenue as I can in the education fund, where most of our expenses will fall, and some of our as-needed funds, such as IMRF, Social Security, and the tort fund, try to keep as little amounts of money in those funds while still trying to cover our bills. So you can see in Fund 50, municipal retirement, Social Security, at the end of the year, there's only an $85,000 projected fund balance. So we do have a little over $1 million are projected at the end of the year in our working cash fund, which is completely our rainy day fund to be borrowed if from other funds, if our cash balances, if our funding doesn't come through as we anticipate. So that is, I've always called working cash our rainy day fund, and that is something that periodically we can abate that fund if we need it in other places, which we did probably in 2004, abated that and started all over again when we were having cash flow issues. So we still have, at the end of the year, project to have $2.6 million in our capital projects fund. And remember, that's the fund where we accumulate the money from our property, or our county facility sales tax. Thank you. County facility sales taxes. So that with possibly interest that we've accumulated on those funds, and possibly a small amount left from our auditorium project, because we do anticipate that all funds will be, punch list will be finished on the auditorium, and that all funds will be expended at the end of the fiscal year in June by that time.
Do you remember what did you anticipate would come in from
the sales tax? Did you make an estimation based on the last quarter?
When we, $1.5 million is what we're looking at, because we,
'Cause we had
when
four.
I did the budget, I had 10 months worth of revenues.
Right.
And, just based on what the other months looked like, that pushed just a ballpark of a little over $1.5 million. When we started the process and did the bonds, the estimate was more in the neighborhood of 1.3 million, so we've exceeded the expectations. And that is looking more like it'll be, 1.5 million. The districts that I've talked to that have been getting that money for many years, Williamson County, that is one thing that's been consistent. Maybe not month to month, but on an annual basis, they're getting the same amounts of revenue without much variance.
And does that 1.5 mil consider what will be abated? Or that's total?
That, because the decision has not been made by the board to abate anything moving forward, the only thing that this budget reflects is what the board already did abate. So if the
Okay.
decision is made prior to February to do an abatement, then I will amend the
That'll
budget
change, okay.
in June. That's kind of a big assumption to make,
Right.
that the board will or won't do that. So, if we do that, I will definitely, and that's one of the reasons when I amended the budget in June, one of the things I did that for is that abatement this year.
Okay.
So the, education fund revenues do include the evidence-based funding. The fund balance that we started with this year was, because we started, really close to a balanced budget for the year in the education fund. But we started with a fund balance of 3.4 million, and that was higher than we anticipated. The evidence-based funding, the $860,000 that we received that in the very last 3 months, April, May, June. Realizing that a lot of that money is targeted for new positions in order for us to meet adequacy, all those different guidelines that we talked about last spring when we first started talking about the evidence-based funding. And so our beginning fund balance was higher than we anticipated because that money came in at the very end. No opportunity to spend that, but hiring 7 certified staff at the beginning of this fiscal year, hiring 9, and those are new positions, hiring 7 certified, 9 non-certified parapro positions at the beginning of this school year has been what we've spent the biggest part of that money that we received at the end of the year. So as we go through each month, we'll receive part of the new evidence-based funding, as long as we don't get prorated by the end of the year, which I am always hoping and praying that doesn't happen, because the evidence-based funding is in the budget, but as we've seen year after year, during that 5-year proration, it was in the budget, but we got shorted $4.2 million. So, I continue to be optimistic that we will get that, while trying to be conservative and not planning on spending all of that money until the check is cashed at the end of the year. So, much of the funding that we receive through this year, then we will be looking to carry forward and look at what can we do, or what decisions will be best for the district for next year. So a lot of information, a lot of little detail. I guess I will ask what questions you have for me.
Does the board have any questions of Mrs. Bush?
Jan, you mentioned that the projected ending cash balance for the education fund is about 3 months' worth of payroll. But in reality, there are other expenses besides salary to our employees, so you're looking at less than 2 months' worth of
That's
expenditure.
included salary and benefits.
Yeah, but if you're a $24 million budget, that'd be about $2 million a month on an average.
We're not quite there, because we have a lot. If you think of the $24 million budget, we have all the flow through with SIU pre-K, which is more in the line of $5 million. So we pull that out, and some of our other flow through sources. So we are at a little. Rick just asked me today on our financial reports, our through the end of August salary. What did we say? 2.2 million that we'd spend on salary and benefits through the end of August, and that was 4 payrolls.
Yeah.
So we're a little over $1 million, maybe $1.2 million salary and benefits each month.
But you have other expenditures though.
Sure.
Utilities,
absolutely.
maintenance ability. So really, you have less than 3 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that was kind of my point.
That's not cash flow that'll get us through. That's just making payroll for those 3 months, absolutely.
I know rating agencies
Spot on.
typically look at cash on hand compared to average monthly expenditures, and I would be looking at you saying, you have less than 2 months worth of cash on hand.
Sure.
Okay.
And I think that's where, we haven't received our audit yet, and we hope to have that for you at the October meeting. Our auditors have been really swamped this year. I keep asking them, is it coming, is it here yet? And that's one of the things that we have less cash on hand this year than we did last year, because some of our insurance proceeds at the end of last fiscal year were sitting in the operations and maintenance fund, and we reclassified those over to the capital projects fund. So we got the benefit of that. Look better on paper, but that's not a fund that we get to consider in our, operational funds.
Okay.
So you're exactly right on that.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Other questions?
So you said we have less cash on hand than last year? Because last year, I have last year's out, and this is more than what it was last year's.
No, I'm just saying, at the end, we had a $2 million, it actually may have been the year before, Kara, when we started that, because I think, when did the auditorium fail? 16? Summer of 16? Summer of
last
16.
year.
So it's the year before that we got to carry that $2 million and include it in our operating cash. So that's, I didn't say that exactly right.
Other questions from the board? If not, I will open up to the audience. If you have any questions or statements about the budget only, this is your time. All right, hearing or seeing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn. So in a second. Second. All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.